Unlikely camping trip turns deadly. You won't believe how we survived. It was nearly the end of the high school year for Jacob. Jacob was a considerably strange young man. Unlike the majority of his peers, he had little interest in spending his free time engaging in activities he deemed unchallenging. He was a major athlete and loved track racing. You would say he was obsessed with action, or that he was an adrenaline junkie. Regardless of what others said, he considered himself someone who loved flirting with danger. He and his friends were very excited to begin their summer vacation activities, as they had planned them throughout the school year. They wanted to spend a few days camping outside in their local forest area, near the foot of the town's mountains. Jacob believed the experience would be exciting and well-deserved break from the boredom of school. He planned to go on this adventure with his two best friends, Ben and Anya. Ben had been best friends with Jacob for years at this point. He had always been someone who spoke his mind, despite his general attitude. He always tried to be popular in school. Anya was also a close friend of both Ben and Jacob. Unlike Ben, she did not ignore others' feelings. Jacob wasn't like either of them, despite being their friends. He had always been far more friendly. On the last day of school, Jacob, Ben and Anya all gathered in the student homeroom and began discussing their plans for the weekend. They had wrongfully asserted that they were alone. The classroom they stayed in was very dark and dimly lit. The fluorescent lights flickered on and off, and their buzz drowned out any sounds that could alert the teenage trio of anyone potentially eavesdropping on their conversation. Before they could conclude their conversation, a faint question could be heard in the background. Jacob ignored it. Anya looked in the direction of the voice before quickly snapping her neck back to Ben and Jacob once she had made eye contact with the voice of the figure. Ben was not as quick as his friends, and when he noticed Anya's distressed reaction, he turned his head to fully face what she was looking at. It was Lyle, another student in the high school. Lyle was a student nobody talked to. Throughout their few years in high school, he was known as being unknown. He had no friends. He always sat in the back of the classroom. Teachers rarely noticed him, and his fellow students actively tried to avoid him, and no one, for any reason, tried to talk to him. There were many reasons why. Lyle's hair always appeared messy and unkempt. People who got close to him would say that he had a noticeable bad smell. He was skinny and frail, and frequently wore flannel shirts tucked into his pants, a style of dressing that most in their high school did not consider very fashionable. The very few times he was forced to talk in class caused most of the other students to contain their laughter. He had a lisp and squeaky voice. Lyle asked his question again, but louder, as he noticed he had gained their attention.
"Please, can I join you guys?"
he pleaded. Both Anya and Ben immediately glanced at Jacob. After all, camping in the woods over the weekend was his idea. Jacob choked on his words, stuttering out nervously. He did not want to invite Lyle on their trip, but did not know how to politely decline Lyle's request. "I don't think that's going to be possible, Lyle. We only have gear and food for the three of us. We're not even sure if it will be enough for us. Sorry," Jacob said apologetically. Lyle replied,
"I can bring my own. I have loads of camping gear at my home, and my dad used to be camping all the time. I can bring extra stuff. That way you guys don't have to worry about not having enough stuff."
Anya cringed. Ben inhaled deeply. Jacob was unable to come up with anything to deny Lyle's good offer. He had to accept. "All right then, you can join us. Meet us at my house on Saturday morning." Lyle smiled and giggled. He was happy to finally be involved in some activities with other students, even if he had only summoned the courage to attempt to befriend people on the last day of school. He quickly exited the room without saying much to change Jacob's mind. Jacob frowned.
"Why did you guys say yes?"
Anya explained. "Because it would have been rude to say no, and my excuse was not good enough," Jacob replied. "That kid is so weird. I don't want to be out in the woods with that creep, not to mention how awful he smells and how ugly he is." Ben snarked. "Don't be so dramatic. We'll just take some of his food and ditch him. When we meet him again, we'll just say we lost track of him," Anya replied to Ben. Jacob briefly considered his choice of friendship. They all left school shortly after and returned to their homes. The next day, Jacob was visited by an unusual knock at the door. It was early morning. Jacob's parents were not home, so he went to open the door. The early morning breeze made Jacob shiver in his bathrobe. He clattered his teeth and opened the door. It was Lyle. He stood in the doorway on outdoor equipment, looking unfit and out of breath. Clumsily over his shoulder was a worn, bulky camp backpack, stuffed with things that indicated he was extremely eager to go on this camping trip. Jacob rubbed his eyes and yawned, before asking why Lyle was there so early in the morning.
You said I should come in the morning, didn't you? Am I not on time?
Lyle questioned. This is too early, I just woke up, Jacob replied to Lyle in annoyance. The contrast between Jacob in a bathrobe and pink slippers and Lyle in his quirky outfit only seemed to anger Jacob more. Jacob invited Lyle inside of the house and began to get prepared for the camping trip. Lyle eagerly waited in the living room, his legs unstable and rocking back and forth from excitement. Once Jacob had finished his preparations, he walked back to the living room and waited with Lyle for the other two. Anya arrived second, with Ben arriving shortly after. The four of them began their journey towards the foot of the mountain area. The journey transitioning from the small, quiet suburban area to the massive, sprawling and seemingly endless forest was very tasking. They had to walk over 30 miles. Sometimes during their walk, the weather changed from sunny and bright to dark and gloomy. Jacob feared that rainfall would hinder their camping adventure, so he insisted that they walk faster and faster. It never ended up raining, but by the time they had arrived at the foot of the mountain area, they were all already extremely exhausted from the long-distance walking. They all carried backpacks full of gear and food for the trip, which was a considerably heavy load and made the journey even more tiring. Jacob's backpack was a mix of excitement and eager packing. Instead of the usual camp essentials, there was an assortment of snacks, energy bars, various candies struggling for space, and stale blankets flying from the ceiling, which worked as a temporary blanket. Although he managed to squeeze in a bottle of water, the rest of the backpack indicated that he was moving quickly to the camp, and there was little room for practical items required despite his lack of preparation and the weight of the load. Jacob's enthusiasm for the journey did not waver. Anya's backpack was packed neatly and showed simplicity, a testament to a balanced approach to camping. Tucked away inside were essentials carefully chosen. Her well-organized first aid kit featured the basics. Anya's waterproof backpack also housed a compact, high-quality tent, emphasizing her commitment to comfort without unnecessary bulk. Ben's backpack was the epitome of preparation, carefully packed with a focus on camping essentials. A neatly folded sleeping bag, compact but sturdy tent, and a comprehensive first aid kit ranked first in the luxury special category. The contents of Lyle's backpack, however, were a complete mystery to all but him. He didn't bring it out and show the others what he had packed. The only thing the others could hear from his bag was the sound of metal. As Jacob tried to catch his breath, he noticed their surroundings and began to look in amazement. The air around them was extremely foggy and the trees were tall and close together. The wind whistled and shook the leaves. "Oh my goodness," Anya explained. "This place is absolutely beautiful. We definitely have to set up camp here."
I don't think that's a good idea, Anya,"
Lyle replied. He continued.
"I noticed some tracks that came towards this area. They look like bear tracks. We could be in some danger if there's a bear around here. Or worse, if we're close to where the mama bear keeps her cubs."
"Shut up, Lyle," Ben snapped. "There's no bears around this place. We made sure of that when we asked."
"Asked who?"
Lyle replied. "People online," Ben muttered, slightly embarrassed. Lyle continued to attempt to convince the others that they could not set up camp in their current position. However, by a majority vote, they decided to ignore his advice. As they spent the next few hours setting up what they needed for the next day, the grey, murky sky turned very dark. Nighttime had arrived. Jacob and Ben went out with torchlights and axes, each that they had packed to gather firewood for cutting down trees. Anya and Lyle were left alone at the campsite with only a small flame illuminating the area. They both sat in silence around the minuscule campfire, barely illuminated by its weakening flames. The two of them felt very awkward. Neither knew anything about each other. Neither had they attempted to make conversation with each other. Lion fiddled with a branch that he found on the ground, while Anya just looked at the small fire in front of them, once again avoiding eye contact. Anya asked a question.
"How did you know my name? We've never spoken."
she softly inquired. Lyle initially looked puzzled. Then he smirked, and his smirk broke out into laughter. Anya squeezed her face in confusion and thought to herself, "What's so funny?" Lyle calmed himself down and spoke just as softly as he did.
You know my name, don't you? What made you think I wouldn't know your name?
There was a pause of silence between the two, and they both giggled, continuing the conversation and asking more mundane questions about each other. It was odd. Anya realized that he was not as much of an alien as she thought he was. "Why did you think it was a good idea to ask if you could join us?" "You know you're not really well liked in school, right?" Anya asked.
Yeah, I know. But I didn't really have anything planned for the summer, and I just wanted to have one good memory here before I left town.
Lyle responded with a sad tone. "Leaving town?" she questioned.
Yes, my family and I are moving to a new state. I didn't mind at first, but I realized that I had lived here for years, and I did not make a single fond memory or experience. So when I overheard you guys talking about going camping, I just jumped at it. Camping is something I'm quite good at,"
he replied. Now the vibe changed. Anya felt bad, and for some inexplicable reason, felt upset that she would likely never see Lyle again. Why? She barely knew him. She never liked him. Was it that she felt sorry for him? Was it that losing someone you've become accustomed to seeing most days was just that sad? Even she didn't know why. Jacob and Ben were now returning. "Wow, I'm surprised the little weirdo didn't murder her," Ben sarcastically said. Jacob was not amused and harshly replied, "Ben, you need to learn to stop acting like anyone you don't like is a dangerous criminal. You're mean and I don't like it." They threw quite a few logs of firewood onto the small fire and allowed it to kindle. Soon the weak, disappearing fire turned into a strong, powerful, bright cluster of flames. As the fire crackled, the group decided it was time to set up their tents for the night. Ben, who considered himself an outdoor enthusiast, confidently took charge, instructing everyone how the proper way to pitch a tent. Lyle, however, spoke up politely, suggesting an alternative method he had learned from his camping experiences with his father. Ben, feeling annoyed at having his authority questioned, dismissed Lyle's suggestion with a scoff. "Look, Lyle, I know you think you know what you're doing, but I don't think your tent will keep steady if it finally decides to rain." Lyle persisted.
"It's not going to rain. We can be sure of that because the clouds we were running from before are headed in the other direction. We need to secure the tents to be undetectable from bears."
"For the last time, there are no bears in this area," Ben shouted. "Stop being a paranoid little nerd."
"But what about the bear tracks I saw before?"
Lyle snapped. The tension between them grew stronger, and Anya attempted to mediate, suggesting that they combine their knowledge for an even more secure setup. Jacob, caught in the middle, tried to ease the situation by agreeing with both of them, hoping to maintain harmony within the group. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, as if nature itself were observing their human drama. Eventually Lyle was dismissed. The tents were set up in Ben's fashion, and they all went to sleep for the night. The night was almost peaceful. The gentle and quiet sounds of nature put all the teenagers to sleep. The sun began to rise, and the day was just about to begin. Then, all of a sudden, the peace of the night was destroyed by a loud, terrifying, blood-curdling growl. All four of the teenagers woke up immediately and ran outside of their tents. Anya began to shake, her eyes darting all around the campsite, looking for the source of the danger. Ben's glance stayed in the direction from which the sound came. Jacob looked only at Ben, and Lyle was busy digging through his bag in a panicked hurry. Ben noticed something move in the distance. He slowly approached it, confidently believing that he would be in no danger at all. And then he instantly began to shout in sheer terror. About 50 meters from him, there was a massive grizzly bear, and it was running straight towards him at high speeds. Ben immediately snapped and turned back, sprinting in the opposite direction while shouting, "Bear!" Jacob and Anya followed him and kept running. Despite their youthful bodies and generally fit physiques, the grizzly bear closed the gap, and almost immediately, with its heavy stride and muscular body, the trio navigated the uneven terrain, dodging roots and fallen branches. The soft glow of the rising sun provided just enough light for them to see a few feet in front of them. Jacob and Anya crashed through tree branch after tree branch, snapping and scratching and crawling as fast as they could, eventually evading the bear completely. Ben's foot caught under a hidden tree root, sending him sprawling into the forest floor. The bear closed in, casting a looming shadow over him and scrambling to his feet. Ben let out a pathetic, helpless and loud screech as he braced for the jaws and claws from this big brown beast. When, out of the blue, as if right on cue, a loud sound blasted through the air, a loud sound that left ringing in their ears. The bear immediately fell to the ground, right over Ben, and lay there, dead. Ben squirmed and scurried out of the bear's body and stood up, looking around the place, his heart still racing, his breath shortening and his body drenched in sweat, mud, and now animal blood. Ben's sight was drawn to a smoking rifle, which to everyone's surprise was held by Lyle. Lyle had killed the bear with a single gunshot. Ben could barely muster any words to say to Lyle, whose nerves were shot from the intense chase he had just barely survived. He quivered and muttered a sincere, yet embarrassing, "Thank you." Lyle, with a confident, cocky smirk, replied,
"You're welcome."
"Wow, Lyle, I didn't know you knew how to use a shotgun," Jacob explained in awe.
"Neither did I,"
Lyle chuckled. Jacob clasped his hands.
"Well, let's head back to the campsite.
We can scale the mountain in a few hours." Anya and Lyle looked at Jacob with unamused faces. "Are you crazy?" Ben shouted. "I want to go home." Ben was now crying and shaking. The other three looked at him with a mix of pity and surprise. The once chatty and wild boy had turned into someone who cries and was scared. They couldn't even blame him. What they had just experienced was very traumatic, and they didn't know how they would get past it. All right, we can leave. Although, I'm just saying, what did we come camping to do? We came to have an adventure, and I'd say this was quite an adventure, Jacob said with a surprising amount of happiness. "I almost died, Jacob. I'm never going camping again," Jacob muttered. The four of them walked towards the campsite and began packing their stuff to leave. As they packed, Anya and Lyle talked.
"Lyle, I need you to hear this,"
Anya spoke.
"You've got to get a skincare routine."
Lyle stood in embarrassment, almost trying to interject.
What? "And you need to start washing your hair with soap and moisturizing shampoo. And you also need to get better deodorant and smell better,"
Anya said confidently, despite being a bit rude.
"Thank you, Anya. I suppose I needed to hear all that,"
Lyle replied. Jacob walked towards the both of them. "Hey Lyle, you're actually kind of cool. Maybe you can hang out with us for the rest of the summer? Considering you're leaving town soon, like Anya said."
Really? I'd like that. It would be very nice,"
Lyle smiled. The four left with the rising sun. With the summer of adventure sure to come, the crazy story of how they had been chased and outrun by a bear, only for Lyle to shoot the bear, was a story that they were pretty sure no one would believe. It was definitely a life-changing experience, and an adventurous story they would remember forever.